Vejigante is a concept that was created in Puerto Rico, and that's why we call it Vejigante. And vejiga is the name that comes from the cow bladder that's being used, and is basically an instrument to do mischief to people in the town of Ponce. When you see a masquerader, they usually have these cow bladders, and they usually use these to hit people around the street. That's the initial ball of Vejigantes, or the Carnival ball. And by the way, Venice is the birthplace of Carnival. Spanish took it upon themselves in Andalusia, and they brought it into the Caribbean with the conquest. My name is Felipe Rangel, and my other last name is Piscini. My ancestors in Puerto Rico were people who came from Europe. Rangel is actually German, and that's how you pronounce it, Rangel. Pero we say Rangel in Puerto Rico is, for a different pronunciation. Piscini is actually from Corsica, from Italy area, And my grandfather from my mother's side basically are the people who basically came, his ancestors came through. I started off being a teacher in Brooklyn, PS 46. And in that school, I noticed as a dual language, well, there wasn't dual language yet, but it was a bilingual program. So as a bilingual teacher, I noticed that most kids were from my native land. They were from Puerto Rico, and a lot others from the Caribbean, But I noticed that they didn't know much about their background. Well, since my job is to teach kids how to read and write and do math and science, I said, why not use the culture? So I started teaching my kids to use art and to use their culture and to their backgrounds, and we created a play. We had to study the culture of Puerto Rico and how that, integrated with their cultural background. And we had to study the whole thing, and we presented this in the school as a holistic, presentation. I had mothers sewing traditional dresses for the girls. I had dress codes for the boys, how to play the congas and whatnot, and pleneras. We had those too. And that's how I got them involved. After that success story, because my principal was blown out of the water with this, he was like, oh my God, this is so wonderful. People, my kids were playing the music, they were dancing to the music, they were doing everything through music. And we wrote we call it the dialogue for this play. So it involved writing, reading, art, everything. So my kids learned the culture through that, and also learned the reading, the writing, the math, and everything else. Years later, I started liking the fact that I was doing the art. So I said, let me do it myself. And it took me about 10 years to produce something that was adequate for me to sell. But another maybe 20 years after that, it took me to the level where I'm at now. So, of course, I had to go back to Puerto Rico, look at what the other artists in Puerto Rico were doing, and creating my own style. So, in a nutshell, that's how I got started. It starts with basically going and creating a mold out of cement or clay. This is made out of clay. This is smaller. It's a rooster. The ones that you have seen up there are representative of this. Now the bigger ones, this one would be, I would say, this one, and the other one in the corner. I have my own technique. I rarely tend to share that technique because it's personal to me. But the ones that I know and they share with me was that they go to the beach, they take sand, wet sand, they create this, form with wet sand, and then they take plaster of Paris, pour the stuff on top, and then they take that with them to their house and fill it with cement. So that's the beginning of the molds. Then you have to sand it down, smooth it down, and then when you're applying paper to this, you have to apply a non-sticking agent like aluminum foil. But then once it's secure that way, then he applies layers and layers of paper. Same thing with the molds of the horns. Then basically you wrap this with aluminum foil, and then later on, after you have enough layers of paper on it, you pull it out, and that's how you use this. You start with the face, and then to the face you add the eyes, you cut out the eyes, and you cut out the mouth. You open the mouth up as far as you can open it so that you either add teeth or you don't. The teeth are all paper mache as well. They each one are constructed into the mouth. Sometimes with this one, for example, has a tongue. That needs to be constructed outside of the mask. So that is added to the mouth, and then you have to paper mache it into the mouth. The horns are the same thing. The heavier horns usually carry other horns. So you either paper mache at the base, and you make sure that the base is really, really strong, and you add the other horns to it, depending on the style that you're trying to create. Some horns could be facing this way, some horns can be facing up, some horns actually facing in, and it all depends on what you want to accomplish with the mask. The basic concept is that the face needs to hold everything together. So how many layers the face needs to be? I would say a good number would be 25 to 30 layers of paper. When you dry this in the sun, this thing is like solid rock. The function of the mask is to be worn, and it's for people to have the masqueraders say call and response to the public who are seeing them. So when you are participating in Carnaval, this is, you know, there's songs and sayings that they say, and they call and response to it. So that's how it works. It's a very functional kind of tradition. I think it's important to connect to our traditions because there is history involved, there is a tradition involved from many generations of people. And it identifies you as a person who, you know, you come from that background. So I think it's important. So is, you know, doing this for Puerto Ricans is the same way for anybody else. This is just, to me, this is just an art form that can be used to represent you or any culture, but this is only a medium. You see, you can create that medium to become something that is connected to a culture. And I think the world is about differences, yes, but it's also appreciating those differences to make us more connected. And once I understand who I am as a Puerto Rican, I would understand better a Dominican or a Jamaican or whoever, because I know who I am, and therefore I have the knowledge to apply to it to any other culture. You know what I mean? I think that is the way I think should work. Appreciation of somebody with a different background comes from knowing their own.